start? What's the most important? Because you'll quickly realize that there are endless things you could be doing every day, and you can't even do 5% of those. So it becomes very critical to decide where you focus your attention. And then finally, what are kind of the key ingredients that lead to success, meaning success shipping your first product. As I have found, the qualities that are required now and the sort of success critical factors, they change over time as you grow in size. They're very different in the beginning than in later, which is why it's so hard to take a company from scratch to $100 million. But yeah, basically, I'll be talking about the very early beginning. So yeah, that's kind of the agenda. So why don't we get started right away into why start a hardware company in the first place. And so I want to talk a bit why I started a hardware company and how that came to be. So it was, I still remember the date when I started it, of course. I didn't plan to actually. I started the day, I got up in the morning with the plan to go out on the street and to interview about my idea, which was green tea that I wanted to brew and sell in Germany. And I remember my friend would come to Berlin at the time. I was still living in Germany that day. So we together would brew tea at home, go on the streets and try to create this new healthy drink for the German market. That was our plan. But then the last minute we heard there was a startup weekend in Berlin, and it was for makers and gamers. And so just in the last minute we decided we would go there. And we basically both had no idea about hardware and no intention of actually starting a hardware company. But then, as it turns out, and for those who don't know what a startup weekend is, basically all kinds of people show up. Everyone has 60 seconds to pitch an idea, and you build little teams around it, you work on it for a weekend, and that's it. And so we went there, someone got up and said, I have a cool idea, vibrating metronome. And I thought, well, that sounds cool, I'm gonna join that guy. And that's literally how Soundbrenner got started. So it was almost a huge coincidence. And this is the first product we built back then. This is how it looked like in basically 24 hours. Here you see the little switch, which is kind of a wheel, which turned into this today. And then here you have the case where the motor was supposed to go. And yeah, this is kind of a quick recap. There are 200 million musicians in the world, and again, everyone has to care about rhythm. It doesn't matter if you play piano, if you play drums, if you play guitar, you have to play on the beat. And the same goes for beginners and professionals. And obviously this is our product, this is what it looks like. It's a wearable that allows you to feel the beat. You can also wear it in different areas, like your leg or your upper arm. And yeah, that's how it started. But as you'll see later, it grew quickly into a lot more. So kind of the first lesson of how we got started is, in a way, it sounds like almost like it's a coincidence that I'm into this, but I think it's not, because like, what's the best reason to start it? And is essentially the idea that you can't not do it. That's how much you need to want it. And it's a bit absurd that I happened to be there, and then I want it so much that you have this insane determination that you really need to see it through. And I think what I realized over the course of the weeks after starting it, that I was really sort of enchanted by the idea of consumer electronics and starting our own company. And I think many people here can relate to that. It's kind of a magical experience to hold your own product. And I was always, my entire life, very passionate about product design, looking out for the little details, comparing products, figuring out what did the designer think. And so in a way, I definitely stumbled into my calling. And if you're not sure yet if hardware is your calling or what exactly is your calling, basically what I did, I went to many of these events and tried many of these different things until I found it. So it wasn't as much as a coincidence as it sounds. I've repeatedly exposed myself to all kinds of different things until eventually it just clicked out of nowhere. So that's kind of one advice if you're not exactly sure what to work on, would be just keep getting exposure until eventually it hits you. Then kind of the second big part of why you should start a hardware company is that hardware is actually a necessary part of our business, or your business. So for us, the question immediately was, when we started, by the way, it was just at the peak of the wearable hype. So Fitbit had pretty good success, and there were rumors about this new watch from Apple, which hasn't been announced yet, but we knew it's going to happen and everybody's going to have a watch. So why make another wearable and not just use the motor in the Apple Watch or all the other watches? Why not make an app for it? And so immediately, while we were 1 week in, we had this realization, fuck, everyone will have a wearable and we're dead and we can't build a hardware company, what a bummer. And what we then found out was that it's actually 100% necessary for us to have this hardware. And that's really important because many people, and they realize that far too late. So we were always brutally honest about these sort of things and try to figure them out soon so that we can either fix them or say, okay, this business doesn't make sense. And in our case, it was, again, the vibration motor, which now is around 700% stronger than of any other product that you can normally buy. So, and it really has to be, otherwise that literally doesn't work. And there's also very little risk that any other company who doesn't care about insanely strong vibrations would ever build that, because it takes a lot of space and battery. And so we're on the safe side, and it made sense. So, but I think this is really an important exercise when you start, like, can I do this with someone else's hardware, or can I just make an app for it? And then the second part, which is not exactly a necessity, but is a necessity if you want to go really big, is that software needs to be part of your strategy. To explain, there are a few examples I want to walk through. So for example, on the top left, so these are all examples that do not have a software as part of their strategy. On the top left, we have Juicy's, which is a very successful Kickstarter campaign around 4 or 5 years ago. They invented the premium cable. So they said, you have an iPhone, you have all these fancy phones for hundreds of dollars, why not have a nice cable? And no one did that at the time, and they had a huge success. They actually sold $400,000 worth of cables on Kickstarter. But before they even shipped, long before they even shipped, Belkin and all these other guys, they made the same cables and put them in the Apple Store. They put them all over the place. And today, actually, no one knows that Juicy's invented this entire category. No one has heard of them, but they invented this. A similar case, also from Kickstarter. This is a nice idea back then when everyone had a MacBook Air with 120 GB of storage space. You could put the card inside, and this one, it would seal your MacBook nicely in the SD card slot and give you 128 gigabytes of extra storage with a micro SD card. Same story, really successful Kickstarter, and within weeks they've been copied, and the price went from $40 to $1 on Taobao. And of course, the Fidget Cube is more recent. Probably most people here know it. Huge success. So for them, probably the initial hype was already enough to be set, right? They made like $6-7 million. But if you go to Huaqiangbei today or any other place in the world on the internet, they're everywhere for no price whatsoever. So you can't really build a sustainable business on these kind of ideas. Even the really big success stories over time run out when it comes to having no software component. So GoPro obviously is a billion-dollar company, and they did really well for a couple of years because they did a few things very excellent, like marketing, branding, and then also they had definitely some edge on the technology. But now if you look at their stock price compared to their peak a couple of years later, they used to be at around $80, now they're at $9. So they basically lost 90% of their value since they had their IPO. So why? The reason is that eventually, even good technology innovation like this, it gets commoditized by China, and China is getting better and better at this. Looking at Xiaomi, they can just make that much cheaper. And just now, basically, GoPro is making the switch And you can again see how that makes so much sense to have this platform thought and that software thought from day one ingrained into your company's strategy. In the case of GoPro now, basically the CEO said this around 2 months ago. They want to change their strategy to become a smartphone accessory. So they have this app component to it that essentially allows you to take the video from your GoPro camera and automatically find the best moments, turn it into a video, handle part of the distribution and all that. Because they understood the only way for them to survive and become a valuable company is they have the best algorithms and sort of this platform from taking the footage and making something out of it. And so I think this was a really important realization for us too. Like, if you start out and you make a vibrating metronome, sounds like such a simple product, and you can't build a company around this. And you can also force yourself to come up with something, with a platform. There really needs to be this underlying need that you're serving that involves both the hardware and the software side. So I think that's a really important part when you're starting out to think about what is my software play. And if you have that, you're going to have a lot, that's not going to happen to you. And you really have a shot at shooting at something really great. So what did I mean for Soundbrenner? So just as a real world example of how we evolved our idea after realizing some of these things. So basically at this moment, our app already has 500,000 downloads, and we're very, very seriously focusing on building a platform for rhythm, which means we're not only making the variable that you can use, but we're also building the exercises, the practice log, user profiles, achievements, motivation, and all of these other functions, a setlist library that syncs to the cloud, and many other things, just to build up competitive advantages over time, and also deliver that kind of what Apple is famous for, this magical user experience that is fully integrated software and hardware working together beautifully. And so that was our conclusion. And essentially, our company's vision today is no longer a metronome, but really becoming the ultimate platform designed for every musician in the world to master rhythm. So, if you kind of figured these things out, like you bring that determination, you really know you want to make this your life, you're having an idea where hardware really makes sense, and you know that ideally you even have this software component in mind already, which, by the way, is also really important to get investors on board if you ever want to raise money. Then the next question is, where do I start? And so, again, like I said, there are millions of things you can be doing, and a lot of them seem actually like a good idea. So, for example, you can go to conferences, to talks, you can design your business cards, you can make a fancy office, and millions of other things that seem somewhat productive. You can meet all kinds of people and have these like preliminary discussions before you actually have anything to sell. And in my opinion and in my experience, it's all a waste of time. Basically, the right way to start a company is to do only two things and ignore everything else very relentlessly, which is, number one, like, talk to your customers. First, of course, you should know who your customers are, and then talk to them as much as possible, and then as fast as possible give them something that they can give you feedback about. And then that process needs to repeat again and again and again and again. So just ourselves as an example, this is how we started. Obviously not great, but it was already good enough to give to some musicians and ask them what they thought. And by the way, this stage is, in my experience, really brutal, because your product's gonna suck pretty bad at first. And so most people don't have the imagination to see what it could be one day. And so you will receive very, very negative feedback, where people are trying to be nice, but you can tell they think you're an idiot and your idea is stupid. And then basically there are two options: either they're right and you don't know, or you think you're seeing something that they can't see yet, And that was always the case for us. And we thought, once all the pieces are in place, it can be something. And so that's how we started. We went through iteration. I brought a couple of pictures just to show how much we prototyped and tested. These are some of our prototypes and mock-ups we made. So we literally tried everything. The first question was like, which vibration technology to use? Where do you want to feel the vibration? Does the vibration have to be in one point, or maybe around the whole arm at once? Maybe you want the vibration to count, so you would have a 1, 2, 3, 4. It would vibrate around your arm. Would that be a good idea? How to input, and millions of other things we went through and asked musicians, how do you like this? And we had, again, like so many different vibrations motors, and we didn't care it looks crazy. We didn't care we didn't really have a brand or anything like that. We just wanted to know, what does the product have to be in order for it to be a good, compelling concept that people would pay money for, and they would consider a great product. And kind of the first thing you may realize, if you're like me, I have a business background, you're not going to be able to do that on your own, because you just can't do prototypes. And if you start engaging a service provider, which can be a good idea regardless, but not for this part I would recommend, because you really need to have that very fast iteration of prototypes. You really need to have that technical knowledge. This is the first time you need it, and then even if you work with a service provider down the road, they can help when needed, but you still need someone to manage them and judge, do they do a good job or not, down to all the details like information architecture. For example, for us it was the synchronization algorithm between the Soundbrenner poles and the phone, and maybe synchronizing multiple units. Like, these things are really difficult problems, and it's very hard to hand them over to a service provider. So kind of one of the things that are important during that phase, have a technical co-founder if possible. And then finally, if you went through that phase of iteration and negative feedback, and you persisted, and you came up with the final concept, which for us, for example, meant new features that we developed throughout that phase, were things like, I can show some of them, like a capacitive touchpad, so you can now tap the beats right here. I can go and just beat the tap onto my device, and it follows it. And these are all things that were not our initial idea, which was just vibrations, but they came through at user testing. Or other things would be the fact that it's modular, that you can take it out and you can wear it everywhere. And we knew that that's the right way to go, because every person who tried 5 different spots had a different feedback. So we knew it needs to be flexible. Humans are different how they perceive vibrations. So basically, we considered this our main job as founders of the company. We needed to figure out what the best product is. We knew, okay, this is the product. And then kind of the next phase starts, which is to take your vision and bring it actually to life. And so for us, that meant working with service providers. So we engaged with industrial designers, mechanical designers, electrical engineers, firmware engineers, because my co-founder with a technical background can't do all of these things. He only knows enough to manage them, basically, and to figure out the very high-level things, and then, for example, the music-specific things that any service provider wouldn't know. But I think I would definitely have not been able to do it without a technical person on my side. All right, so yeah, that's that point. And then lastly, another really critical point, and it's a mistake we've personally made, is the validation does not end with the product. Our fault, our mistake kind of was to assume, now that we know we have a great product, all we have to do is to talk about it, and we would sell a lot. But it's a very different thing to figure out the marketing of your product and what your product needs to be. They both need to be great. Basically, in my experience, the two really success-determining factors in a hardware company are those two things, product and marketing. And so we just thought of, for 2 weeks, why do people like this? What did they tell us? And then we created this crowdfunding campaign. And of course it took some time. We had to make a video and photos and a website. We had to build an audience of 20,000 email subscribers and all these things you do for a crowdfunding campaign, and it was a month-long process. But the one critical thing we sort of neglected was to actually test and validate this positioning and the pain points and how we talk about the product as well. And that led us to have a pretty shitty launch when we launched, and it was very difficult to turn the boat around and get a successful crowdfunding campaign while it was actually running, like reposition the product and get again the attention and eyeballs of the world to now really understand what is it. So just as a particular case for us, we decided to sell it as the world's first wearable device for musicians, which we thought was really smart because metronome sounds boring. And everybody loved it in the sense that they wanted to know what is it, what's the world's first wearable. It was, we had a fantastic pre-marketing campaign where we got 20,000 emails for 10 cents an email, which is a crazy cheap number if you know know the normal price for an email might be more like $1. So we were literally like half or 10% of the normal cost. But then the reason why that worked so well is because there was so much ambiguity. People didn't know what we're actually selling. And because we thought, we make this hidden whisper campaign, we're geniuses. And then when we actually launched the product, most of the people that signed up, they were not interested in a metronome. They wanted to just know what is it. And we never tested the messaging because all we did was talk about it in ambiguity. And so, I would really encourage everyone to not take this part too lightly and test that part a lot as well. All right, then last point, the key ingredients for success. Of course, there are a lot, but here are some that led us to get us where we're today, and maybe now a bit more thorough introduction where we are today. So again, we launched on crowdfunding, where we ended up raising 240,000 US dollars on Indiegogo. We have a couple of nice marketing videos that probably now combine to several million views. We launched 3 apps for macOS, for iOS, for Android that have exceeded 500,000 downloads. We have around 30,000 units manufactured and 25,000 units sold. Happy users from all over the world, so we're measuring customer satisfaction very close, and most of our customers are really happy. We have artists, like people who play with Enrique Iglesias, for example, tours with Enrique Iglesias, or this is the band of the show The Voice, and we have Jordan Rudess from Dream Theater, if you know him, and a couple of other really famous artists. A team, global team, and also global distribution. So we're in much more countries than these here. We're probably now in 25 countries with distributors. Our largest deal is with Guitar Center in the United States, where we're with 270 stores, which is every store they have, with these interactive displays where you can try the product right in the store. And it was basically all done in a matter of 2 years. We only started to seriously work on this in 2015. So what were the key factors, at least in my own perception, that made us successful? I think that it came up earlier too. One of the really key things is that you have to learn fast, because hardware companies are involved in so many different areas, and that's really something very specific to hardware companies. A software company, you're involved in far less areas. As a hardware company, you have to do millions of things, and there's no way any job in the world could ever prepare you for all the different things you need to know. So the only way to succeed is if you can learn new things really fast. And there's just some of the things we have to learn from scratch, right? Mobile apps, backend, electrical engineering, mechanical design, industrial design, supply chain management, manufacturing, quality control, logistics, certifications, accounting, digital marketing, exhibitions, e-commerce, retail distribution, inventory financing, channel management. That's not even half. I could keep going the whole day. And so you need to be a fast learner, which is not very actionable advice, but if you feel like you're not, don't start a harder company. Then the other thing that is kind of related to that is you need to relentlessly embrace the 20-80 rule, which means always trying to get to 80% of the results with 20% of the effort. So it's very critical to be almost paranoid about the return on investment on every dollar you spend and every minute you spend because of this whole list. Like if you think you can be Apple, which does everything to absolute perfection, then it's not gonna work for you because you're gonna take way too long for everything. So so in my experience, kind of the state where we've been constantly doing all these things is, the analogy would be kind of a train that's like rattling and almost falling apart and running at really high, driving at really high speed, but somehow it still keeps together. Like that's kind of the feeling that I had the first year. Now, as we grow more established, it's getting better. But the first year felt that way, and I think it has to be if you're moving fast. And that means you really need to be comfortable with a lot of chaos and uncertainty, and you need to be able to make decisions with uncertainty and make the right decisions with a certain degree of uncertainty. Number 3, which is also very distinct to hardware startups as opposed to software startups, is you need to leave the building. Like, for example, when I think of Instagram, I think they were acquired for $1 billion when there were 17 people sitting in a basement. And all they did the whole day was looking in their screen and writing code. And that somehow works for software. But for hardware, the story is obviously very, very different. You need to have an insane amount of mentors and connections. And so one way of doing this is being here, so that you're here is already great. But then also trying to find programs you can tap into. So for us, that meant we partnered with Brink, which is an IoT accelerator based here in Hong Kong, and also our first investor. But there are many others. For example, Hardware Massive obviously also just talked about such a program that taps you into mentors, which I think is great. Like, I don't think we could have done it all on our own based on the experience we had when we started. And I think, again, these kind of things can also help you speed up and basically getting the most important information to hit that 20-80 rule, right? So they can tell you what you can forget about and what you need to worry about most. And then, again, that now is universal. Determination is really key. There are a lot of ups and downs, which I think is great. I find it glorious. It's like a battle. Starting a company, there's ups and downs, and you just endure. And I think you can only do it if you really care for some deeper reason than I want to have a company, I want to tell people what to do, or I want to be rich. For me personally, it was this passion for creating products that I just love. But then, there are all other kinds of reasons. But you need to be determined, and I think it's a much better word than passion, which sometimes is confused with I don't feel like working. I want to follow my passion, and then it's not work. So my experience has been starting a company is very much the opposite of not work. It's more work than probably anything you can do, but the difference is you actually love that grind and that work because there's this excitement for it. So if you bring that, you have this very important ingredient. All right, that's it. That's how to get started.